So really quickly, I want to take a fast look at some of the stuff that got turned in just to um, again, not to point anything out too much, whatever, just to sort of like, again, the common mistakes that I'm seeing here, and to sort of expand a little bit on terms of what I'm actually talking about in here. So in this, what I typically do, and this is something a good habit for you to get into, we talk about doing this with layer masks. We talk about isolate your stuff so that you can see it just by itself. You just be shocked at what you can actually take away from something. So to isolate this tonal retouching small layer, if you hold down your option key and simply click on the eyeball, it turns everybody else off. And the problem that you can immediately spot with this is look at how hard the edges of that brush are. And it's never going to work. So again, it doesn't look that bad in use. So again, if you keep your option key and click on this again, you can turn this on and off. But you'll notice again, that those hard edges will give it a little bit more blotchiness. It's just something to actually keep in mind. It's just a really good trick to think about in terms of when you're looking at your work, trying to troubleshoot stuff. So that's that one. I'm going to look at ties next. Oh, shit. Hang on. So in looking at ties, it's just something that you spot right off the bat, and I just sort of want to show you what to be thinking about and looking for. So again, if you hold down your option key and simply click on the eyeball, it turns all the other layer eyeballs off. So if you click on it, it turns everybody else off. If you click on it again, it turns everybody else back on. It's just a way to get it out really quick. And so you can see in this one that what's happening in here is that this is really dominated by burning tones in here. And overall, that will make the entire area darker. So it's not really evening things out, is making the whole entire area look darker. And so you can see what happens as a consequence of that. So this is what's actually happening here. And this is something that people did quite a bit. So what this tonal retouching is about in its essence, in the small tonal retouching work, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to smooth out this texture, this skin texture that's all right in here. That's that's the goal of doing this work. So if you turn this on and off, you can sort of see what still needs to be done. But then when you get to the tonal large work, I'm going to show you something else here. It's not going to really be on ties, so I'm going to show you that part later. But again, what I'm just trying to say here is that in all of these scenarios and situations, especially in this tonal small work, you want the work to appear kind of even. So you need to have a feeling that the dodging and burning here is about the same. If you have too much dodging, then your area becomes overall too light. And if you have too much burning, your whole overall area becomes too dark. You're really looking to get that balance. That's basically what's happening in here. So again, if you hold down the option key and click on that, you can see this area is really dominated by darker color. And so it's pushing the whole area down. And that's not something that we're actually looking for. I'm going to show you another consequence of this in just a second. So hang on one second. I can pass on that. Yeah, no, hang on one second. We're going to do a little bit of this. We're going to do the hair on this figure in just a second as a group. So I'm not going to dwell on it a lot, but I do want to show you a couple of the problems and solutions that people actually did in this strategies. Some of them that I thought were better than others. So Juliana's really quick. Oh, shit. Every time I try to do something quick, it blows up in my face. So the hair fix on the surface looks somewhat good, but again, if you isolate it, so again, I'm going to hold down my option key and click on the, you can see she actually went in and hand painted it, which I thought was a brilliant move in here. If you disable the mask, so I'm going to hold down the shift key and click on the mask, you can see that it was actually hair that came from the image. And then she actually used this mask. If you take a look at the mask, again, hold down the option key and click on the mask, you can see. So it was kind of a smart move, but what ended up happening, or at least my take on this when I was looking at this, so I'm going to turn everybody else back on, was that because you really lost the individual strands of hair, you kind of recreated strands of hair. It looked like it threw it out of focus to me. So it was a really smart idea. I was impressed because when I first saw it, I thought, Jesus, this actually looks pretty good. But at any rate, so yeah, we're going to do it in class, and I'll show you guys the way I would approach doing this anyway. So nonetheless, that was one issue that came up. Another issue that came up with a lot of people was sort of where you started and stopped hair. A lot of you were doing it. It was starting like right in the middle, so it would take off. So I'm going to show you Avery's really quick so you can see what I'm talking about. You can see where it starts right here. I mean, there's just, there's this hard cut line that's right here. Again, if we take a look at the layer, the patch itself, you can see that hard edge. It's just, you're never going to be able to fake that one. So anyway, there's that. And two more to show you really quickly. So I thought Aaron had one of the strongest ones in here, but there's an issue with it, and I want to show everybody what it is and how I would fix it. So if you take a look at this, what you can see is that the skin itself is flawless. I mean, take a look at this. It's ridiculous. It's, again, if I hold down the option key and take a look at the just the tonal mask, the tonal layer itself, by itself, you can just see the amount of detail that he went in and actually did in here. And this part is, it's flawless, right? This is actually what his large tonal layer looked like as well. If I turn this part off, you can see it sort of restores this sort of like highlight area. What ended up happening, or as a consequence of all of this, is that he has actually smoothed the skin out perfectly. He has removed the texture perfectly, but he's also then in turn removed the natural highlights and shadows from the face. So her face is completely flat, right? This is something that makeup artists will actually do, is that they'll go in and they'll actually take areas. So this is the way to think about it. Anything that's sort of protruding towards camera, you want it to be lighter. Anything that's receding from camera, you want to be darker. That's how it naturally happens in photography, right? So there's tricks and strategies to this. A lot of people would actually do this exact thing as first step because you're starting now with a blank canvas. And so now I can actually go in and modify this. So some people would actually try to put a layer mask on this and then knock it back a little bit. I don't think that's the best way of doing it. I think the best way of doing this is simply to add the highlights and the shadows on top of all of this. So that's how I'm going to do it. So I'm going to go up to the very top of his image. I'm going to click on this. I'm going to add a blank layer on the very top of that. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush, and it's going to be probably, I don't know, not a completely, I'm going to do around a 25%, somewhere in there. I have already done this once, so I know I need to knock my opacity down because my flow at 1% was not low enough. So again, if you get down to 1% and things still happen too quick on you, then just knock down your opacity, and eventually you can get control of it all. So I'm going to start with her nose. And again, the bridge of her nose is coming towards camera, so that I need to have a highlight that's a little bit lighter on that just to give it dimension. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. And in this case, I'm going to hit the X key to make white my foreground color. So I'm painting on this layer right here. I'm actually going to do it. I'm not going to change my blending mode of this right now. If I feel like it's too strong, I could change the blending mode of this layer to color instead of actually doing it just as a painted highlight on top. But again, because my flow is so low and my opacity is there's skin that's going to be showing through here. So I want a straight line on her nose. And the trick to doing straight lines is I'm going to tap once right here at the very top of her nose bridge right here. I'm going to come down here to about this part of her nose, hold down the shift key and click once, and you'll see it draws a paint line straight down. So then you can do the same trick again, and I am going to do the same trick again. And you can see I'm beginning to build that part up, and that's all I need. I also need a highlight on the tip of her nose, so I'm just going to start tapping that in like that. And so this is basically the way I would start it. I feel like I need a little bit more up on the bridge up in here, so I feel pretty good about that. Then I need a bigger area of highlight on the cheek of her skin right here, so I'm going to do a much larger brush for that. And then I'm just going to start to paint in a little bit, and that's really about all I need. I think that's maybe a little too much, so I'm going to hit it again like that. I'm going to do the other side to do the same kind of thing. So that's beginning to bring in my highlights, but I also need to do shadows in here as well. So I'm going to hit my X key to get my darkening color. I'm going to make my brush smaller, and then I'm simply going to, on this side of her cheek over here, just a quick brush down. That's my brush is too hard. I can see the edge of that, so I'm going to undo that, make my brush completely soft. Knock my opacity down even more. What I end up finding, especially on skin tones, is that you typically your darkening, your dodging color, I'm sorry, your burning color, the darkening part, whatever, tends to be more extreme than your lightening color. So a lot of times when I'm making this stuff darker, I've actually got to take the brush down, the opacity and the flow down even more. A little bit bigger brush, again, completely soft, and again, one stroke, maybe two strokes on the side. And I'm going to do the same on the other side over here. And so it may not look like much, but this is the difference. And you can see it gives her face dimension. So it's just something, so the way you did it, to be perfectly honest with you, after all that work, this works great. Because again, you can then start to paint in really large areas, which you can't really do when you're dodging and burning, when you're really trying to fix and get rid of the blotchiness. So that's what the tonal large thing is about, is to really try to smooth the skin tones out, but it's never been designed to remove the natural highlights and the shadows in a face, because you need those in order for a face to have dimension. Questions about any of that? Okay, and I want to show one last one. Oh, shit. How many times have I done this so far during the first 10 minutes of this class? I do wish Photoshop would get their act together. So this was Liz's, and just take a look at this. It's like flawless. So if we take a look at her tonal small layer, look at how complex this is, but look what it does. It was so well done. Good job. Anyway, so I need everybody to open up a copy of this file. We're not going to work on the tonal part of it all. I think everybody has a pretty good idea how that works and when it's needed and all that. But I do want to go over the hair. I want to talk about the hair strategies for all this. So I'm going to run back. So this would be our session number 6. Okay, so I'm going to zoom into the hair part that's up here at the very top. I am going to go to my pasteboard here, so hit the F key. So because I want to be able to work outside of this, I want to be able to have my cursor go to the outside of this part. I'm going to start off by making just a copy of this background layer, Command J. I'm going to double click on it and rename it Pixel Retouch. And say OK. And then I'm going to grab the lasso tool, the L key, and I'm just going to copy the entirety of her hair. So everything that I can get that is hair, I'm going to grab the whole thing. So I've got part of her skin, part of her eyeball. I don't care about that part. This is just where I'm going to go with this part right here. So I'm going to jump that to its own layer, Command J. Again, Command J just works like copy and paste. If you have an entire layer selected, it copies and pastes the entire layer. If you have a selection, it will copy and paste that. So it's up on its own layer right now. You can see it's sitting right up here. So then the first thing that I do is I modify this. Again, I don't want to use it straight up as it is right now because it'll show up as a repeating pattern. Again, unless I alter it some way, it's going to look just like the hair that's already there. It may have been shifted to the upper right or the lower left or something like that, but it's still going to be completely recognizable as a repeating pattern. So I need to modify that guy. So I'm going to hit Command T, which is the transform dialog. And the first thing I typically do is rotate it. So I'm just going to hit it to the side. The next thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom out now a little bit so that I can get those control handles so I can move them further away because I want to stretch the hair out now. So again, holding down a spacebar command and option key, I can click and zoom back out a little bit. And then I'm going to grab the middle handle that's at the top of this selection and I'm going to pull it up. Maybe not that much, and then I'm going to grab the lower handle and I'm going to pull it down. So I'm stretching the hair out as well. But one of the things that I feel about this, you can pull this off to the side. You can actually see, you'll see the bounding box. You can sort of see what we're actually getting to do. So I'm sort of like putting it in this way. But I feel like that this hair is all too just like jet straight. It feels like it's like a ruler to me, right? So I want to put a little more organic shape in it. So to do that, you need to warp this. To get to the warp tool, you can find it in two places. With the transform dialog box as it is right now, if you take a look at your options bar up at the very top, there's this weird little icon right next to the word that says bicubic. I always think it looks like a badminton net or a tennis net or something like that. I mean, that's my best description of it. That's the warp tool. You can either click on that little icon that's up in the top right-hand corner, or you can come to the edit menu, down to transform, down to warp. It does the same exact thing. And this will put a series of control handles on this same transform dialog box. And every one of these little dots will allow you to modify to actually transform this image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the dot that, if you imagine this sort of like a clock face, we'll look up at my screen, you can see the one that I'm talking about right here. I'm going to click on this and just push it in. And you can see it's starting to push in the upper part, but it's also starting to put some bend into this image. Now, I really want it to happen more in the center part of this image, so I'm eventually going to go after that same point, but I'm going to click on the intersection of those two lines, the one that's a little bit more in the center, and push it into here to get a little more bend here, and then go after the one that's on the edge. So I'm getting a little more curve shape in here, and you don't need tons of it, but that seems to be right for me. So then I'm going, I'm going to say OK to that. So simply click the check mark to say OK to that. So this is my new patch that's in here. Now, again, I can't tell where it is in relationship to the image that's underneath it. And I need to do that. So I'm going to put a black layer mask on this to hide it. And then I'm going to paint where I need this thing to actually show up. So to do that, I'm going to hold down my option key when I click on add layer mask, and it will put on a black one. If you can't remember that part, I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. Simply put on a regular layer mask. So simply click on the layer mask at the bottom and invert it, Command I, or go up to the invert button that's in the properties panel for the mask. Either way, we end up with a black layer mask on here. I am going to go to my tablet right now. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I've got to, everybody okay? Anyway, I'm going to make this a medium hard brush. Again, the reason I'm doing medium is if I use a completely hard brush, you'll actually see the line of the new hair that I'm putting in. If I go to a completely soft brush, then you have edges where you are mixing old hair texture with new hair texture. And again, that's destructive. That's not a good option. So in the middle, medium hard brush is the best move we can make. I am going to bring my opacity all the way back up again though, and my flow all the way back up again. And then X key to make white my foreground color, and then make my brush a little bit smaller. And then we have a choice here. I'm going to zoom in. So this is the only part where the hair really needs to be added. The new hair needs to be added on this. But it's going to be really challenging to get this to start in a place that it doesn't feel like I'm just adding it right in the middle of her head. So instead what I'm going to do is, even though the hair that's up here above this spot doesn't need to be changed, if I can start my mask at the very edge, the very top edge of my picture, and go all the way down through the side edge of my picture, then you don't know where the hair has started and ended because it goes outside of the frame. So it's just an easy way for me to do it. So white is my foreground color. I'm going to start up here at the top. I'm going to simply click and I'm going to drag all the way down. And I've missed a little bit of this side on this part right over here, so I'm going to add it by just clicking a little bit more. And that's how I'm going to actually do this. To see what this really looks like, hold down your Option key and click on the layer mask, and you can see I'm starting from one edge and I'm going all the way to the other. So I'm never going to run into the problem of having some hair look like it's starting in the middle of a place where it shouldn't be started. However, when I then click on the pixel content again to actually see the whole thing, you can see there's no hair that's actually covering this. That's fine. My mask is in the correct spot. Where it's not in the correct spot is the pixel content, is the actual hair. I can't move the whole thing, because if I move the whole thing, I'm going to hit the V key to move it. If I move the whole thing, it simply moves the layer mask off of the spot that it's supposed to be. That's not going to help me. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. Instead, I'm going to click on the chain link between the mask and the pixel content. So it's the little thing that's that little weird icon that's between them. If you click on that, this breaks the link between the mask and the pixel content. And now you can move either the mask by itself or the pixel content by itself, which is what I want to do. The mask is in the correct spot. It's the pixel content that is not in the right spot. So again, I've broken the chain link. I've clicked on the pixel content, the patch, the hair patch that I'm working with. It's got the brackets around it. Hit the V key to get the move tool, and then you can actually move this into place. And you can see that, okay, yeah, that's beginning to move into place. Am I getting a repeating pattern here? I feel like I am, so I'm going to try to break this up a little bit more so it doesn't look quite so obvious. Maybe join that up so it looks a little bit more believable like this. And even though I haven't covered all of the hair here, I feel like that this is a good start for me. I've still got some skin that I actually need to fix, but I like what I've got going here. It's a good first step in this. So with that being said, I'm going to merge this down now into the pixel layer, because I'm going to start this whole process all over again. So to merge it down into the pixel layer, you hit Command E. And that is now that whole layer, including the mask, the patch, everything. The patch got applied, then it's put down here into your mask, and we're off to the races again. The L key to get the lasso tool. Click and select. Oops, don't hit the button on your mouse that moves something. L key. Select the entire selection of hair again. Command J to jump it to its own layer. Command T to transform it, rotate it, stretch it, warp it, say OK. You can warp after the fact, just so that you know. Again, holding down the Option key, click on Add Layer Mask. You'll add a black one. Take your B key, a brush. Again, we need to start outside of our frame, so I'm going to go all the way to the top again. White is my foreground color. Click and drag this all the way through that area. I feel like that probably works. click on the link between the mask and the pixel content to break it, click on the pixel layer, hit the V key to move it, and we can slide this guy around and bring it up into something that is looking a little bit better in here. Anyway, you get where this whole thing is going, right? I still feel like there's enough of a repeating pattern here. I'm not really thrilled about that. So, but we can still transform. So with the pixel content still selected, Command T to bring up the transform dialog box again. And again, we can continue to rotate it and shift it a little bit like that. I feel a little bit better about that part. Pull it down, stretch it a little further apart. So we'll make these pieces a little bit wider, move it around. Yeah, that's becoming a little bit more. And again, you guys clearly can see where this is heading. I mean, I'm not going to spend hours and hours and hours doing this. But in all of these cases, so I'm going to, again, merge this down, Command E to merge it down. So this is basically where we went with all of this. So that's how I would do it. Questions about this? Okie dokie. That takes care of that. So I'm going to show you guys, you can close this up to get back to the stoplight thing so that you can close this image up. Hit the F key again to go to the black pasteboard and the F key one more time to get back to the normal file, and then you can close that up. The next one that I want to open up is, again, we are in session 8 today. So if you click on your session 8, inside of that you should see file called dustremoval.psd. So again, in the session 8 files for students, there's a file called dustremoval.psd. If you can open that up into Photoshop. So I have already talked to a couple of people about this, but how many film scanners are in here? Yeah, so you guys, how do you feel about dust when you scan? Yeah, it's just like it's a nightmare, right? It's like you can spend your whole life dusting stuff. So what I want to show you is a way to, the way I remove dust, it tends to be a much faster process. However, the thing that I want to stress here is that the trick that we're going to use in doing this doesn't just apply to dust. We're going to really leverage history states in this. So it's just something I want you to be aware of, that that this is a great technique for removing dust, but the whole history game that we're going to play in this applies to a ton of other options. Some of the things we've already talked about. We use history states in choking and spreading. This is basically the same sort of idea of what is happening in there. So where I'd like you to look at here is, I want you to come into the upper left-hand corner. So again, I'm going to hold down spacebar Command key to temporarily get the magnifying glass, and I'm going to zip into this corner right here. And you can see this was a piece of film that was scanned. I did not do the scan, but it was my picture. Anyway, and you can see there's a bunch of dust on it. There's scratches on it. I mean, it's a shit show, right? And so the idea that I'm going to go in here and like actually try to hit every single one of these things, and again, healing brush tool, clone stamp tool, all of that kind of stuff, just a nightmare. So again, I want something that's much faster and actually, ironically, less destructive. So that's what I'm going to do. So my first move is to make a copy of the background layer, Command J. My next move is to go up to the filter menu and come down. Don't ask me why it's located here, but it is. And under the noise filter, over to dust and scratches. So again, up to the filter menu, down to noise, and over to dust and scratches, and a dialog box will actually open up. And in the dialog box, this is a really old filter, so they haven't updated it in ages. It's unfortunate because the preview box is really small, but it is what it is. So where we're going to start with this is to sort of explain what radius and threshold are. So you need to try to zero them out. You can actually get radius all the way down to 1, and you can get the threshold down to 0. So what radius is how big is the piece of dust that you want me to do this on. So you can see there's little bitty pieces of dust that are in here, and then there's much larger ones. If we grab, the first thing you always do is you zero these out as much as you can. Again, you can't go below a radius of 1. That's because this is an old dialog. There's so many dialogues that now allow you to go to a half a pixel or so. Anyway, but that's not this dialog. I'm going to start with this, my radius here. I select it, and then you can use your arrow keys to just tap up. It only goes in increments. You can't do a 2.5. You can't do, so it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, and on and up. And you can see, you can go up and down, that when I clicked it to 2, some of the medium pieces of dust started to go away. If I go to a 3, this piece of dust right here is gone, but the bigger pieces of dust here are still there. So I'm going to continue to work my way up. However, don't get trapped into doing a radius that is so big. If you've got one giant piece of dust on your screen, accept the fact that you're just going to retouch that using the clone stamp tool. Don't raise the radius so high that you get that one abnormal piece of dust. Go after the real average stuff. I've got a lot of dust that's this size, and this radius gets rid of it here. So I'm going to tap my key one more time. I'm also looking at the scratch. That's something that you definitely want to get out using this trick. So when I get to a pixel radius of 5, the biggest stuff for me, or the majority of the stuff for me, is gone. So I'm not going to go any higher than this. You don't want to hit this any higher than you actually have to. Then what threshold is about is threshold is saying, how much of a difference between the background and the piece of dust tonally do we need for you to run this filter on it? So you'll see that the threshold runs all the way from 0 all the way up to 255. It's the entire tonal range of our image. If we go up to 255, what we are now saying, and all the dust comes back, it would have to be, because what you're saying now is that the dust needs to be more than 255 tones away from one another. That is an impossibility in this. We only have 256 tones in this. So the trick to this is, I'm going to drag it all the way back down again. You want to start raising the threshold until you see the dust return. What this really becomes important about is that what we're doing right now is a massive blur on this image, and with film, you lose film grain. In a digital world, it's not as bad because you have noise in a digital world, but you don't really have film grain. But in scanning film, you've definitely got grain, and this move right so far is we've stepped all over that grain. So what threshold really is designed to do, or ultimately the effect of it, is it returns the film grain. So at any rate, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to select it to make it active so it's highlighted, and I'm going to use my up and down arrow keys, and I'm just going to start tapping until I see the dust return. I don't even look at the value, but I can see that at a threshold of 6, I'm starting to get a bunch of dust back on my image. So I'm going to drop it back down again. I'm going to wish that I'd cleaned my screen, because all the dust and dirt that's on my screen is throwing me completely off. So let me try that again. I'm going to start to raise my threshold again. And I'm starting to get this scratch back in around a 10, a 9, it's still away, an 8, a 7, somewhere. I'm at a 5. That's where I feel like it's a sweet spot for me. You guys agree?
I would say 4 or 3.
What's what?
I would say 4 or 3.
4 or 3? All right, I'll drop it down to a 4. Okay, and then I'm going to say okay to this. So take a look at what we just did to our image. If you actually take a look at the figure itself, don't do this because this could actually change something really quickly. I'm just going to turn this layer on and off, and look how much it just blurs the whole image. It just whacks the shit out of the whole thing. So at any rate, over on your history palette, where we are right now, you want to do a history snapshot of this. So if you click on snapshot, I get this, you can name it dialog box. Everybody here who has upgraded past version 2024 of Photoshop, this has been broken. It's still, you can go in and name it, it's just been broken. So I'm going to act like I'm in the same as you guys. I'm going to just go ahead and say okay to that so I get this, but you need to rename this snapshot. So if you go to the top of your actions palette, you'll see that there was a dust removal PSD. That's the file name as it was opened. That's what the image looked like when we very first opened it. This snapshot 1 is what it looks like with this dust and scratch filter on it. So I'm going to name it that way. Double click on the word that says snapshot 1 and call it dust and scratch. And say okay. But now the problem that we have, dist and scratch. Okay. The problem we have right now is that if I make any move at all now, anything, I'm going to lose all of the history underneath it. See all the history states that are underneath it that have been grayed out? That's why everybody is so angry about what Photoshop has done with this. I can go back and select this thing right now, but it just seems like this unnecessary complication. In the old days, when the dialog box opened up and let you named it, your history state stayed at the very bottom. So you didn't lose any of this. You didn't run the risk of this. And so what I'm talking about is watch what happens here. I'm going to actually, you'll see, my history down here is all grayed out. I'm going to add a layer. And I've now lost all of that history. And I can't get it back. So instead, what you would do, I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. Instead, what you do is you come back into your history before you do anything else and come down and select the bottom state again so that we can do the next move that we need to do. And the next move that we need to do is actually go back one step in history. So go back up to where you had layer copy. So what I have now is I've got my 2 copies of layers. Both of them have dust and scratches in them, but I have a history state of what this image looked like when the dust was gone. Does that make sense to everyone what's going on here? So to use it, you do not want to select the dust and scratch state. What you want to do is you want to click the little box that's to the left of the icon that is called dust and scratches. You want to click in that little box, and you'll notice that there was an arrow at the very top that said in the dust removal, that was what the history state was when it moved, but we've just changed it now. And what I'm saying is that now I want you to use, when we use the history brush, I want you to paint this image to make it look like it looked when we did the dust and scratch filter. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. We need to use the history brush right now. So again, I'm going to go to my tablet to do this. To get to the history brush, it's right underneath the clone stamp tool. If you click on it, you'll get a flyout menu. Make sure it's the history brush, not the art history brush. But we can now use blending modes for this brush. And this is why we do this, all of this madness to get to this point, is that now I can actually control where that filter has been run and where it hasn't been run. But more importantly, I can use blending modes so that I only change the dust. I don't change any of the area around the dust. It's just going to impact the dust. So I'm going to hold down my space bar to get my hand to come back and see the entire upper left-hand corner. I'm going to click on my history brush. I'm going to change the blending mode of my brush up at the very top in the options bar from normal down to lighten, because I've got dark dust that I want to make lighter. And then again, I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller, but you don't need to really worry about this because this brush now is set up. All you need to do is click and make sure that your opacity and flow are at 100%. Just click and drag down and it will kill everything. You can actually just knock this stuff out. You can be brutal about this. It's only impacting the dust because the blending mode is restricting it to that. I couldn't use a blending mode when I did that filter, so I can do all of that. And it's that quick. Well, Verser, come on, you promised me something that was faster than that. Can't you make it better? Yes, I can. Go back in your history to undo all of that history brush work that you just did. I'm going to go all the way back to where it says layer copy. I'm going to bring back all the dust. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'm going to hit the lasso tool, the L key. I'm going to select a big area. You want to select the beach. Don't get into the guy. You want to stay away from his edges, but I can do really big swaths of dust removal. So I'm going to do this entire upper left-hand corner of the beach. Again, I'm going to stay away from the surfboard. I'm going to stay away from the guy. I'm going to just look at the area that I've got selected. And then I'm going to come up to the edit menu and come down to fill, and not stroke, but fill. And when fill opens up, in the contents drop down at the very top, click on it. You want to go to history. And then this again, you want to use a blending mode here of only lightening. So again, it's only going to affect the dust that is darker than the area that it's sitting on. That's why it is so incredibly restrictive. And then I'm just going to make sure your opacity is 100% and say, okay, it's gone. Do you have any idea how quickly you can blow through a film scan that's full of dust doing this? So I'm going to hold down my Option key, the space bar, and I'm going to click to move over a little bit. So I'm going to hit Command D to deselect. I am going to go back to my history brush. So again, I'm going to keep my blending mode as lighten. I'm going to make it considerably larger. And I'm just going to go to my pasteboard now, the F key, because this allows me to use this brush outside. So I'm just going to bang through all of this whole area that's on this other side over here to get rid of all of that. I'm going to come down to the beach that's on the lower part and just bang through all of that. Knock all of that out, make my brush a little bit smaller, and bang this stuff out into here, and now we're off to the races. So if you take a look at the guy, look at his chest, zoom in, there's another scratch that's right on his chest. This would be really difficult to do. Clone stamp tool, it would actually mush this up. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller, and you'll notice also that the scratch goes up into his white jacket. Just click on the white jacket and drag all the way down through it. It also continues onto the surfboard. I'm not resampling anything. And there's another scratch that's over here on the other side. I can just bang through that. Again, it's so restrictive in here, I'm not worried about any of this stuff. So all of this, it just goes. All I need to do is, if I can find it, I can get rid of it. So last but not least, you need to go over to the girl's shirt right below where they're holding hands. And you'll see that there is a piece of white dust here. Now the way dust works is when you're scanning something, if you have a light background, dust shows up as dark. If you have a dark background, dust shows up as light. It's just the opposite of what you have. That's what dust does. So in this case, if you use the setup that we have right now and you try to actually get rid of that piece of white dust, you'll notice that nothing happens. And the reason nothing happens is because I've actually got my blending mode set to lighten. Well, it's already light. I need to make it darker. So you need to change the blending mode now of your brush from lighten to darken. And then knock that little piece of dust out and you're done. I know. That doesn't suck, does it? You can always tell the people in the room because they have this like kind of shit-eating smiley grin on their face right at this point right now. They're just like, oh my God, oh my God. By the way, there's a PDF on our week number 8 that goes all through the steps of all this. So that's got that one for it. You can close this up again to get rid of this file. Hit the F key to go back to the black pasteboard. F key one more time to get back to the stoplights and click on this. You don't need to save it. It's not part of your homework. So the next part that I'm going to do, I've actually got to pause the video because how many of you actually watched the movies that I asked you to watch? Yeah, that's what I figured. Nobody ever does this shit. So anyway, I've got to pause the video recording because the 2 films that I'm getting ready to show you, they're really short, but are copyrighted, and in the past, every time they have been a part of the recording that I then put up on YouTube, it gets flagged with a copyright violation, and they freeze my video, so you won't be able to see the video. And even though I could challenge them and say this is in an educational setting, copyright does not apply, I don't care that much, so I don't have the time for that, so I'm not doing that. So anyway, I'm gonna pause the video, but that's okay. We'll come back to it in just a little bit. And the file that I want everyone to open is, so again, it's going to be in our session 8 folders, and it's called Digital Diet. very bad name, but I'm going to change that, but I haven't done it yet. So, oh, fuck. It really is, but actually, they've changed one thing. I've only played with I've only done the beta stuff a couple of times, but there's a fundamental change in this beta that I'm going to show you guys next week after I look at the homework assignments that you turned in today. So the assignment: how many people actually tried to replace the mouth? So what I show you next week might be an eye opener. But we'll see. All right. So anyway, yeah, digital diet, if you can just open this up. So this was a shooting that I did for Chicago Magazine. And so for me, looking at this photograph, and so there's some context that you need in this, I think. I've used this photograph for every single one of these classes, and so for me, I came into this class and I said, this was my very, very first class, and two of the people, there was a guy by the name of Tom Shirley and a guy by the name of, I'm not going to remember his name. Anyway, they were the two top digital photo instructors here in the photography department, so long before your all's time. And anyway, when I came in and we got to this class, whatever, and I said to them, okay, I don't know if this is true or not, but supposedly, this is the story, so I'm going to throw it out here because I do believe this is kind of true, that the things that you find appealing or attractive, the things that you are drawn to, your attraction to other people, whatever, is largely determined by what was ever in vogue when you hit puberty, when you really finally became sexually aware. And so for me, that actually happened in the early 60s when models were like Twiggy, rail thin. And so I've always been drawn to women who have boy bodies. And so when I looked at this, I said, I want to narrow down that hip. The one that's on the the right-hand side, I'm fine with, but when she brings her leg up like that, I was just like, I want to narrow that down. And one of the two guys who was in the instructors of the photo department, who was in the class, looked at me and he goes, oh my God, not on your life. And he was a guy who had grown up earlier than me. He was older than me, and he'd grown up in California. And it was all about surfer generation, girl, really curvy, girly, Marilyn Monroe-y kind of hourglassy kind of thing. That was what he had been imprinted when he goes, her body's perfect, right? So the only reason I bring that up is that, what is one man's treasure is another man's trash, or, there is no necessarily right or wrong to this. It just is what it is. Does that sort of make sense on some level? So anyway, I'm going to show you how to very minorly narrow that hip down, and hopefully you guys will do this with me. But again, I don't want anybody in this room to be uncomfortable about this, so we're just going to take it from there. So I'm just going to walk you through the steps about this. This is the old school method that you did. Photoshop, there was a Photoshop before Liquify, so we're going to start here in the old school version of it because a lot of times it's the best way of doing it, it's the easiest way to do it. So that's how we're going to start. So I'm going to zoom in here on this girl's hip. So again, what I'm really just talking about is shaving this off and giving it a little bit better shape. So that's really all I'm going to do here. To start with this lasso tool, the L key, and we are going to make a selection of this because what we're going to do is we're actually going to use the transform tools, specifically the warping tool in the transform dialog box here in Photoshop to do this work. And the thing is that what happens is that the grid that the warp tool is put on has everything to do with the size of the image that we're working on. So if I just made a copy of this image, made a copy of this layer and started to do that work, the grid would go over the entire image, and it gets to be really, really, really challenging to do very specific things. So instead, I'm going to actually copy a small part of this out so that I get much finer control, and you'll see what I mean right now. So the first thing we are going to do, though, is make a copy of this, Command J, and then I'm going to grab the lasso tool, and what I need to do when I do this, I'm going to just watch my screen here really quick. You'll see I'm going to start up here at the top. You want to make sure that you grab part of the shirt in this because my retouching needs to actually it needs to find its way back into the shirt once I make any changes. And then as I continue down here, I also need to come all the way down here to this part of her leg so that I have an entry point and an exit point. If I only do a small selection of just her hip line here, then I don't have a way to get into the retouching and get back out of it again. So anyway, this is the selection that I'm going to make right here. You do not want to include the jacket in this because again, we'll end up warping this and then having to deal with that and take care of that. So this is the rough selection that I'm going to make, and then I'm just going to hit Command J to jump that to its own layer. So if you hold down the Option key and click on the eyeball, you'll see that that's just the only thing that we've got. So then we are going to warp this. So to warp this, you come up to Command T, or come up to the edit dialog box down to transform, and then under under transform, click on the warp tool right here. Or again, remember it's this little weird tennis net, badminton net, whatever that thing is. That's the warp tool right here. So it puts the grid on it, and this is what I was talking about. It makes a very small grid. I mean, this is a grid that's on a very small area, so I have a whole lot more fine-tuned control than if this grid was over the entire image. Now, this tool, you can actually change the number of points on this. You can even get into finer control on this. We don't need to do that part, but anyway, just so that you know that that exists. Then the last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to drop the opacity of this down slightly. The reason I'm going to do that is so that I can really see the shift and the change that I'm making in this. So once that's done, I'm actually going to come to these control handles. So again, every one of these points is a control handle, and I'm going to grab the one that is not the one that's in the top right-hand corner, but the one that's just below it, and I'm going to slightly push this in. And then I'm going to go to the one that's underneath it, and I'm going to slightly push that in, and then I'm going to come to the ones that are down underneath, sort of the bottom. So I'm going to come down to the corner, and I'm going to push that up. And then finally, not finally, but the next handle, I'm going to push this in a little bit. And that is really about all I want to do. Now again, when I talked about where we want to enter and exit, if you zoom into the shirt that's actually at the very top, you can see my retouching is realigning with the edge of the shirt. So that part actually works for me, and I haven't changed any of this part up in here. So I've got a way, this is again a way to get in and out of this retouching. And then the same thing is down here on the leg, although I think on the leg I need to make sure that the leg realigns so it doesn't actually get pushed in. I think right now it needs to be pulled out slightly. It does, to get it to realign. So this is basically my move right here. This is what I'm going to actually do in all of this. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that by clicking on the check mark, and then I'm going to drag my opacity all the way back up again. And then I'm going to zip back out and turn this eyeball on and off. And you can see that that actually does a really good job. And again, you don't pick up the retouching because where I started and where I ended, again, I start and nothing changed here in when it transitions to the shirt, and it also doesn't transition, doesn't go off when it transitions into the pant leg down on the bottom part. So it's just that quick. It's simple and easy to do. Questions about this? All right, you can close this guy up. You do not need to save that. The next one we're going to go after is in that folder that I asked you guys to grab. So in the Liquify New Files, there is a JPEG called, I think it's this D99 one. Yep, it's this D99 one. I'm going to actually ask you to open that up into Photoshop as well.
Can I please have a try?
Yeah. And it should be a very small file of something from the 80s. Aren't you glad you guys didn't live in the 80s? I suffered through this.
Honestly, I wish people still dressed like that.
Oh, don't worry. It'll come back at some point, some way. Actually, shoulder pads are really big again right now, but not quite like this. But anyway, yeah. Okay. I'm going to wait, Liz, till you get this guy open.
The whole Liquify New Files folder, right?
Yep, the whole thing. Because there's a new assignment file in there.
Right.
Yeah, it's the D99 file.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, all right. So the first thing I'm going to do with this, guys, is I'm going to walk you through the steps that I would do for all of this stuff, and then we're going to actually go in the liquify space and look at it and talk about the things that are in there. But the first thing I'm going to do is actually make this bigger, because right now this is a really small image. So I'm going to start off by making it bigger. To do that, come up to the image menu and come down to image size. And in image size, when this dialog opens up, you want to make sure that the chain link between width and height is actually enabled. You'll see if you turn it off, it loses the little lines that go out. You want to make sure that those little lines are there, because what that means is that when I change one value for the height or the width, either one, whatever, that it will proportionally change the other one as well. So I don't have to do that calculation. And then also you want to make sure that the check mark for resample is checked, it's on, because again, we are trying to make more pixels in here, so we need it to be resampled. We're not just trying to change the size of it, relatively speaking, we're trying to actually make the entire image bigger. And then finally, there's a drop-down menu for the resample part. You want to use the drop-down menu and say, preserve details for enlargement. And then we're just going to double the file size. So to do that, I'm going to do the height right now. Again, my height is in pixels, so if you use the drop-down menu that's to the side for units and pick pixels, then you can change the height of this from 640 to 1280. That's just a doubling. So that's all I'm doing, is I'm doubling the size. And you can see it correspondingly increased the size of my width as well, so she's not distorted, and just say okay.
Can you say the number one more time? What was it?
So the height of it is going to be 1280. I'm just doubling the 640. And it should look like this. Okay, so I do want to liquify this. I'm just going to go after the shoulder pads for the most part. I'm just going to try to deal with that part. But we are going to look at this in many other ways. However, one of the things when we do this kind of work that you'll find is that this will end up, because this girl, this is a flat two-dimensional image right now. She is anchored to the background. And being anchored to the background, when I distort the shoulders here, it's also going to distort the background. And so I don't want to do that. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to float her up on her own, and then I'm going to give myself a completely blank background to actually work with. So that's the first part that we're going to do here. And in a lot of the liquefying work, if you're working like on a white background, it's never going to matter. You'll never see the white background distort. But if you have anything that's got pattern or a scene or any of that kind of stuff, you're going to have to do this, or you should do this trick. So this is also going to be our first foray into AI. So for what that's worth. Here we go. So my first move here is that I've got to select the figure. Now there's a million ways of doing it. I'm going to do a rough one right here. So I'm going to come up to the select menu, and I'm going to come down to select subject. So I think I have the oldest version of Photoshop here. So hopefully all of you guys have this at least. And just do select subject and see how it goes. And it does a pretty fairly good selection of this figure. I'm going to take a look around here. It's missing a good part of the hair as well, so I want to actually fix that part here. So to make sure that that becomes a part of this, I'm going to go into the Select and Mask workspace. And you can sort of see it's showing this now on this clear background. This is the figure that's actually been done. I'm going to grab the second tool down. The top brush, again, is the quick selection tool. The one underneath it is the refine tool. You also have in this a refine hair button at the very top. So I'm going to click on that to say, let's see what that does. And it's not the best thing in the world, but it's not the worst thing in the world. It's a little bit more believable. It looks a little less cut out. So I'm going to simply accept that. I'm going to take a look around as long as I'm in here and just see if there's anything else that I don't want to have a part of this. I'm going to get rid of the type. Well, the type is actually a part of this, and I don't want it to be a part of it. So that is the next brush down, which is just a regular brush. If you click on this and then come down and paint over, sorry, undo that. Make this a negative brush and then paint over this part. Oh, so this is not part of the selection. So it's not part of it. We don't need to worry about that part. And neither is the signature up at the top. So then I'm going to finally check to see what this is going to come back down to. It says it's going to come back down to a selection, and that's exactly what I want. Because again, I'm not trying to mask this. I'm trying to jump this to its own, the figure so it's on its own layer. So I'm going to leave the drop-down menu, output to selection, and just say OK. And I should have a good set of marching ants, and we'll see how this whole thing goes. And then I'm just going to jump it to its own layer, Command-J. And so on its own layer, if you turn off the background layer, we can just sort of see what's going on here and take a quick look. And again, for a file that is low res as this, it does a pretty fair job of this. Certainly good enough for what we're looking for. There's a little wonkiness that's happening right by her shoes down in here, but I don't think I'm going to be changing her shoes down here, so it won't matter. It'll line back up with the with my new background. So I'm going to turn this temporarily off. I'm going to just turn the eyeball off. I'm going to go back and turn my background on. I'm going to select my background, and then I'm going to jump it to its own layer. So I need because again, I'm trying to make now a background without this figure on it. So Command-J to create a new one, and then I'm going to double click on the hand to kick back out. So in this case, I can do the rest of this using just the lasso tool. So I'm going to hit the lasso tool, the L key, and I'm going to do a surround. I just want this to go all the way around this person. Stay kind of close to her, but you don't need to get too crazed about all of this. And you don't need to worry about the cutouts that are in her arm. You don't need to worry about this. But you do need this larger than the selection of the girl itself. Or actually, here, let's do this instead. Command-D to deselect. We'll make this faster. Hover over the subject that was knocked out, the one that's at the very top now, the silhouette, the knockout of her that we've actually done. Hold down your Command key and click. That will load her as a selection. And then simply come up to your Select menu, down to Modify, down to Expand, and I'm going to expand about 20 pixels. We'll see. And that seems good enough. So this is just a faster way of doing exactly what I was just trying to do. So with this done, I'm actually going to use, again, artificial intelligence to try to get rid of this. If you do not have your contextual toolbar showing, come up to the Window menu, all the way down to the bottom, almost the very bottom, and click on Contextual Taskbar, and it will open up. You can move this guy around, so you can click on the side here. You can move it all around your screen. If you want to pin it someplace, a lot of people will actually pin it up to the very top. If you want to pin it, you click on the little three dots that exist that are in that part. Click on this and just come down to and hit pin bar position, and then it won't move around. Otherwise, it's always going to move around depending on what is selected in your image. In my case, I don't keep it around much, so I don't bother to pin it at all. If you want to get rid of the bar because it's in your way and you don't use it a lot, again, go to those same little three dots and put on Hide Toolbar. So at this stage of the game, I have a selection going, and I'm just going to hit Generative Fill. And it'll open up a dialog box, and it'll say, okay, fill in here the text that you want to fill. I want this gone. I want this removed, so do not put anything in that bar. Simply hit Generate. How many of you guys are using this? How many of you guys are using generative?
What?
Wow.
That's interesting.
That was interesting, right? How bizarre is that?
That's crazy.
Check out the other variations.
It's got a person in every single one of them.
Oh.
Okay, that's okay. That's all right. That's okay. Plan B. Don't worry, guys. Plan B. Plan B. Plan B. I'm going to throw this generative fill layer away. This generative fill layer away. Just drag it down to the trash because we don't need to keep any of that. I'm also going to get rid of this bar right here, so I'm going to hide my toolbar. I'm still working on this second layer right here. I'm going to try the Remove tool instead. So to get to the Remove tool, that's actually in the Healing group. So come over to the Healing group, and it's the second tool down, the Remove tool. And it's a brush, and so all we need to do is actually paint over this entire person, the exterior of them. If you stay on the outside, when you complete the entire outside and let go, it will actually fill in the whole inside. So anyway, so stick to the outside, and we're just going to work our way around this. Make sure we get all over that part. And then you'll see it fills in all the rest. And then it runs the remove tool. And we'll see, hopefully we will get better results than what happened just then.
My AI worked, but it added an A to the blum.
What?
My AI generator, it worked, but it added a letter to the name, so it says Loretta Blumma.
Okay. Nice. Wait, yours did?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it, again, this is the oldest version of it, and so I'm running into, that kind of problem right here. So to be honest with you, I'm also going to get rid of all the text on this. So I'm getting rid of her, the name up here. I'm going to get rid of the thing up at the very top. If you want to bring it back, we can always bring it back, but I'm going to get rid of this, and then I'm also going to get rid of the Fong Long. I got to say, I think the remove tool is actually, when this thing works, man, it works. It's shockingly how good it actually does work. So I've got a pretty hard line that's running right down this. You can see it's probably the edge of the girl. I'm not going to worry about this too much right now because I think the girl's largely going to be covering this. So what I can do is I'm going to go ahead and proceed to do the work on the girl, and then if I need to come back to this and modify it a little bit, do some clone stamp work or healing work or any of that kind of stuff up here, I can do that after the fact. So then I'm going to come back up now and turn the girl on, so she's pretty much standing just there in the background. Hang on 1 second. I didn't finish removing all of this stuff down at the bottom, so let me just do that part really quickly and then we'll have at it. Okay, so I'm going to turn the girl back on. You want to make a smart object out of this. Liquefying is a destructive move, but it's a transform move. And if you do it using it as a smart object, then it is a non-destructive move because, again, the smart object will protect it. So to do that, come up to the layer menu, come down to smart objects, and convert to smart object. Now, again, this is not a smart object that's based on raw data. So if you double click on this, it's simply going to open up the protective layer that we've actually got inside it. That's all it's going to do. You're not going to go back into camera raw, but it is protected. And so no matter how much we distort this thing, we're going to be able to actually shut it off or go back in space, go back in time to undo all of that problem. So then our next move, once this is actually turned into a smart object, is to come up to the filter menu down to liquefy. And this will bring you into its own workspace. So we are no longer really in Photoshop. So to take a quick tour around this, if you look on the right-hand side up at the very top, these are your tools that we're going to actually use to manipulate the figure. If you take a look on the left-hand side, the right-hand side, that's all the tools that are on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side are the properties. This is where you control the tools. This is where you control other things. So we're going to sort of like go through the tools one by one, have a quick conversation about what they are. Yes? So go up to I'll show you really quickly, up to the filter menu, down to liquefy. Are you good? Okay.
It's working for me, but it made the background transparent.
You don't need, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. I'm sorry, what?
So like I'll use the remove tool, but then it'll pop something back into the image, like something different.
It did that too. Yeah.
It's what?
I think you have to delete the generated.
Oh yeah, did you delete the generated part?
Yeah.
And then just run it again.
Mine was great. I don't know, y'all are.
It normally works great for me. Look, I know what the fuck this is. It's because it's the aliens. They're like, you think you're dressing in the closet. They're like, yeah, this was all.
Yeah, guys, if it doesn't work the first time, run it again and again and again and again. Eventually you'll get it looking like this, hopefully. Are we good? Okay, so again, into the liquefy tool space, filter, liquefy. So the properties that exist on the right-hand side. So we'll talk about what these properties are as we go along. So the first one we're going to start with is the tool that is the very top. If you hover over it, it's called the forward warp tool. This is probably, the tools are probably designed top to, well, no, that's not true. Never mind. Anyway, this is the first tool that we're going to try. So the bracket keys still work here to make your brush. So all of these tools basically are brushes. So if you use the bracket keys, again, I'm going to use the closed bracket key just to make my tool a little bit bigger. If you look over on the right-hand side right now, you'll see that it's got brush tool options. So instead of having your options that run along the top like they do in Photoshop, they're now on the right-hand side, but they're always up at the very top. Every single tool has its own set of options. So when you move from one tool to the next, this entire top part will change. Some of these things are common to everybody. Some of them are not common to everybody, but every one of them has their own settings and they remember their settings. So that if for instance here, my brush size right here is a 175. If I go to the next tool down, it's a brush size of 10. Those are all individually remembered. So this is not a universal sizing. Everything needs to be set for every single one. So the thing that you need to know about this that's, I think, confusing, again, this is a UI thing that I think Photoshop, Adobe should have gotten right years ago, but they don't. So most of these brush options actually exist, but you know them by different names. And so I want to go through those really quick. So what size is size is actually the size of the brush. That is the same. What density is hardness. So to see what I'm talking about, we're going to pick a tool further down. So if you go all the way down to the middle part, there is the first of the brushes. If you click on that one right here, and then again, I'm going to make the tool a little bit larger, and then I'm going to come over and I'm going to take my density and I'm going to drag it all the way down. And then, so my density is now 0, and then I'm simply going to click and drag across. And the minute I click and drag across, I get this warning. You may actually have a red line going across yours right now. So what this is that it's just telling you that you do not have the show mask on. So I'm going to say okay to that, and then I'm going to come over, and it's this little check mark right here where it says show mask. If you turn that on, then you can actually see the brush stroke that I was starting to try to make. So I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to do it again. I'm going to click and just drag it across her body, and you can see it's a very soft brush. To get rid of this mask, because this is a mask, this is now areas how you protect something from being liquefied. So this is again, a poor choice, I think, because mask means so many other things in Photoshop. I would call it, they call this the freeze tool, but then they label it as a mask. So anyway, for what it's worth. While you're here, take a look on the right-hand side in the properties panel. If you can change the color of your mask. You can click on the drop down. By default it's red. You can change it so that if you're working, for instance, on a red image and you can't see your mask, then you would simply change it to be like blue, and then you'll be able to see the mask here. The color of this doesn't make a bit of difference. So anyway, for what that's worth. Also over here you can actually get rid of the mask. Now why they do it this order, I don't know, but if the mask is up at mask options, which is one above this. So up at mask options, if you click on none, it will go completely away. So then I'm going to grab the density of this and I'm going to drag it all the way up to 100, and I'm going to do the same mark again all the way across, and you can see it's a completely hard brush. So what you need to remember is that density is actually the hardness of your brush. So then looking down, I'm going to get rid of this by clicking on none. I'm going to go back up to the to the forward warp tool. And again, in the settings up here, because I want to talk about these first. In the settings up here, size, you know what it is now. Density against the hardness of the brush. Pressure on this one is actually flow in Photoshop, in Photoshop proper. So what this has to do with is that it's a time-based thing. So when you start using this tool, you will actually see, some tools, this one it's not so obvious, you'll actually see something start to happen with very little movement of your tool, and it happens over a period of time. That's what pressure is. And then if you click on rate, you will see that rate you don't have. You don't get rate with this tool. Rate also has to do with how fast something happens in this workspace. And then finally, in this same group over here, you've got two options. Pin edge is one, and then pressure, stylus pressure is another. I don't use stylus pressure. I prefer to control it here, but you can control this with the pressure on a tablet. So if you're using your tablet to do this work, and you should be, then you can actually click this on, and it will then, the pressure will change depending on how hard you're pressing down on your tablet. So the first thing I want to talk about is what pin edges is. So I'm going to undo pin edges here really quickly, and then I'm going to come over here to, actually I don't, we're going to look at that in a different image. So I'm going to go ahead and leave pin edges on. Basically what pin edges means is that when I start to distort this, if I include one of the edges in here, it will distort that edge. This pin edges prevents that from happening. So anyway, with this first tool selected, I'm simply going to click and drag this across her body. And you see that this is what the tool actually does. It pushes things forward in whatever direction that you're going in. If you hit Command Z to undo that, and we actually crank our pressure up and do the same move again, you will see that it distorts it in a much more aggressive way. Command Z to undo that. Take your pressure all the way down, and you will see that as you drag across, nothing happens. So it's just, again, how aggressive this brush wants to be. So the defaults for this are in the 50 for pressure and also the 50 for density, and we can leave ours actually at that point right now. So that's the beginning part of this. We're going to go ahead and distort this again. So I'm going to distort different areas of it. So I'm going to click and drag through her head. I'm going to click and drag through her body. I'm going to click and drag through her other body down here. Now in my case, I can actually see the undistorted body underneath this. Do you guys see that as well? No? If you do, it's this control down here where it says Show Backdrop, again, in the Properties panel on the right-hand side. If you uncheck that, then you will get this image just on this transparent background, which is basically how we should be looking at this. So what that Show Background allows you to do is really give you sort of a before and after, but this preview will also give you a before and after. The preview check mark that's also at the bottom of that same thing, if you turn it on and off, it'll give you the preview and show you what's really going on. So this is how I'm going to leave mine set up right here. I'm going to leave that background not showing anymore. You could change this. If you put on Show Background, turn it back on again, I can still see the figure underneath this, but that's only because I'm actually saying I want you to use all the layers that you're showing me. You can click on this drop-down menu and say, I only want to see background copy, and that's the one that we cleaned the whole image out of. The girl out of. So that's just our plain background. So if you prefer to see this in where it's ultimately going to go, then you can actually control it that way. You also have an opacity slider here that will control how much you do see or don't see, and you can see here this would actually completely get rid of the figure, or I can see it somewhere in between, and it allows you to, it's just control. That's all it's about, preview control, so that you don't have to continue to go back out and turn stuff on and off layers in terms of what you're really looking at. So this is how I'm going to leave mine set up. And then we're going to go to the next tool down. The next tool down is the Reconstruct tool. If you hover over it, you'll actually see it'll give you the name, the Reconstruct tool. It basically undoes what you've done. So if you actually take your bracket keys and make this larger, I'm going to make mine pretty large. Again, I'm going to leave my density at 50. That's also the default for this brush. And I'm going to leave the pressure at 50. Now this one you'll see that you do have rate in this. So to see what that really means, I'm going to simply come up and hover over her face. So I'm going to click her face and hold this tool down and slightly just move a little bit. And that is controlling, again, that's restoring the image to what it looked like before. I'm going to hit Command Z to reintroduce that distortion and change the rate now. I'm going to take the rate and I'm going to drag it all the way up to 100, and then I'm going to do the same thing again, and you can see that immediately it cuts back to what it was. So most people don't want to work this fast. Most people want to slow these tools down so that you really have control, because if something takes off on you, then you have to just repeatedly hit Command Z to undo it to bring the distortion back. So That's basically the way this part tool works in here. So again, I'm going to grab my rate and I'm going to go back to a simple place. I'm going to go down to around 30 something. That's how I'm going to keep mine. I'm going to leave the pressure where it is right now. I'm okay with how quickly that part of it is actually controlled. I'm fine with that. To bring, then now you can actually see as you start to work in certain areas, I can restore just this leg so that it isn't distorted anymore, one side of it, or I can do just this shoulder over here or this part of her body over here. You can just scrub back and forth. That's typically what you do with all of these tools, is you're just scrubbing back and forth to restore these things. If you want to bring this thing back to its original without anything else in here, you've got two options here. At the very bottom of your properties panel, you will see that there's a brush reconstruct options. There's one that's called reconstruct and there's one that's called restore all. If you click on restore all, it undoes everything. Everything that was done to this image gets brought back to its original. It removes all of the liquefying. I'm going to hit Command Z again instead of doing that, and then to bring the distortion back. And then I'm going to click on the reconstruct one. And if you click on the reconstruct one, what it does is it'll actually open up a new dialog box for you, and it'll allow you to reconstruct this step by step. It's basically by percentage. So the default is 100%, meaning there's no reconstruction, but if you drag this all the way back to 0, you've totally reconstructed the image. If you leave it at 50 in the middle, you've got half of the distortion that you're doing in here. So anyway, I'm going to completely reconstruct mine by dragging it all the way down to 0 and saying OK. So I'm going to go back up to the top again to do the forward warp tool, and I'm just going to do some, well here, let's do this instead. I'm going to zoom into her thigh here really closely. I'm going to break this brush much smaller. So let's say I want to take the puffiness out of this. This is not really a body modification because her hips would never be that big. This is actually in the material itself. So let's say I wanted to narrow this part down. I'm going to start with a brush that is really too small. If I really wanted to do this, this is not how I would do it, but I want to show you what the next tool in the group does, so we need to actually do some damage here. So I'm just going to do small little bumps in here to sort of like really leave it almost sawtooth-like. So when this happens right here, if you want to smooth this out, that is the third tool down. So if you hover over it, it's called the smooth tool. If you then click on this and come over to this area, I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger. And again, these all have their own separate controls. So this one does have pressure and it also has rate. I'm going to bring my pressure up to 50, but I'm going to keep my rate down more around 25, 30, somewhere in there. And then I'm just going to come over this area here and I'm going to click and drag, and just to click, and again I'm working my way up and down this to drag it, and you can see it smooths that out. Now you could say, well, Versa, but that just returns it to its original state. This is not back at its original state. To see it at its original state, click on Restore All on the right hand side and you'll see it pops out again even more. So this is a way to slowly work stuff back, but also to smooth stuff down. That's what that tool is about. So next we need to come up to her face and zoom into her face. So the next tool down is the pucker tool. Actually, I take that back. The next tool down is the twist tool. So click on the twist tool. Again, it's got its own options. I've got a gigantic brush, so I'm going to just bring my brush down really quickly. So I'm using my brush, and I want something that is larger than her face right here. So in the assignment that used to be for this class, you would use this tool to actually rotate a face. In our case right here, we're not going to do that assignment, but just to show you what this does, I'm going to hover right over her nose. Now again, in the terms of the pressure and the setting here, I'm going to bring them both down. I'm going to bring my pressure down to 50, and I'm going to bring my rate down to around 25, 30, somewhere in there. I'm going to hover right over the center of her nose. Oh, I've also got a 50 for my density. Right over the center of her nose, and I'm going to click and just hold my mouse down. If you're working with a tablet, you're just holding it down. Now, I'm not moving this at all. If you start to move it, it will actually move quicker. If you then hit Command Z to undo that, and then crank your rate all the way up, and then do the same exact trick, you will actually see that it moves much, much, much faster. So again, you get used to trying to control this using pressure and rate in all of this. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. If you want it to go in the opposite direction, you hold down the Option key and click, and then she will go counterclockwise. So this tool does have uses in this. In most cases, what you would do, if you wanted to do like a head rotation or something like that, what you would do is you would, first off, I'm going to undo all of this. I'm going to zip back out. You would do a gigantic brush, so I'm just going to hold my bracket key down and get a giant one. I would freeze most of her body and then hover over the center part here. And again, you can tilt ahead like that. Again, my pressure is way too high, and my rate is way too high to control this. So Command Z, drop your rate way down. Yes?
Do the pixels mess up the whole image, or is it just because it's in
Oh, I love it that this has happened. I need everybody to come over here and see this really quick. And you also, no, hang on. We're all coming around to you. Oh, because you're going to fix this. Oh, well, you're right. Spin it this way because you can still see this. Everybody come over. This is, you're not going to hear this on the, see this on the video. And sometimes it'll happen with me too. So sometimes you'll see what happens. But see this? That's not good. So what's happening here, it's just, if you can still hear me on the video, it's completely being torn apart. The image is being torn apart, and these are blocks of pixels that are actually not showing anymore. They're not missing, they haven't gone away, but they're not showing anymore. And so the reason this happens is that it's a situation between the software and the graphics card that is in this computer. So to fix this, you are going to go to the Photoshop settings. Here, I'm going to fix this. You can lean around so that you're going to go to Photoshop settings. Oh, and we don't have settings here. So really quickly, no, I'm looking for the Photoshop ones, not the ones for Macintosh. So I'm going to cancel out it because we're in the Liquify space right now. I'm going to cancel out of this, up to Photoshop right here, down to settings, down to performance. And in performance, you uncheck this use graphic processor and say OK. Then if you go back into Liquify, and you will get this warning, and it says Liquify supports hardware acceleration to improve performance. You may want to check performance and turn off blah blah, use the graphic processor, but that's what fucked your image up. So now your Liquify will be slower, but it will not do that. It will not tear your image apart. It's also important that you remember to turn that thing back on once you get out of Liquify, because this will impact, the hardware acceleration impacts all of Photoshop. Okay. So, yeah, with my rate turned down, now I can actually use the twist tool to bring her head a little bit more to the side. It will distort the head if you use this tool to actually do this trick, so it's just something else to keep in mind here. There's other ways to do a very similar thing, but just so that you understand that's what's going on in here. Again, I'm going to click on Restore All. The next tool down, if we zoom into her face again, is the pucker tool. It's just easier to see the effect of these things on faces. Again, it's a completely new set of brushes, sizes, the whole settings on here. So I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. Density is fine at the 50s. Now what you see is that this tool has no pressure. It does have rate, but it does not have pressure. If you then come down on her nose again and click and hold it, you will actually see it puckers this. So it's drawing it in. This is actually what they do when they talk about pin cushioning. This is what pin cushioning looks like in lens distortion. So you can actually use this tool to, if you have, in this case, what we were looking at right here, this would be called pin cushioning. If you have a lens that gives you pin cushioning, you use the opposite tool of this, which is the bloat tool. If you have a bloat condition, which is actually called, I can remember this. It's been a long day. These tools work opposite of one another. So you can do this to actually do lens correction if you are not using the automatic lens correction that's actually in Camera Raw. But nonetheless, if yes. Oh, okay. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. If you hold down the Option key, you're going to get the opposite behavior. You're going to get, again, this is actually going to balloon. It's going to blow it out to you. So this would be how I would go after the 9-year-old girl to begin with, is this tool right here. It's what everyone uses to do this stuff. So it's how you make things larger or smaller here. Ironically, again, I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. The tool right underneath it, so this is the pincushion tool up at or the pucker tool up at the top. The one right under it is the bloat tool. They're the opposite of one another, and the Option key with either one will give you the opposite. So if you are selecting the bloat tool and you normally would get this thing to actually come out like this, really big, then hit Command Z to undo that. If you hold down the Option key and do the same thing, it does the opposite behavior. So again, the tools are the opposite of one another, but the Option key will give you the opposite behavior for either one of them. I'm going to restore all of that again. The next tool down is the push to the left tool. So the way this tool works, if you go ahead and select it, we're going to come over here to her arm. So I'm going to actually go after this sleeve on her arm. So if you wanted to narrow the sleeve of her arm down, which we're going to do ultimately when we do this work here, you could use the push forward tool to actually do it. So the first tool that we've got up at the very top, we'll look at both versions of this and how it works. But the way this tool works is, I'm going to make mine a little bit smaller. So if you want about the same settings that I'm going to use, I'm going to do this with about a brush of 100, a density of 50, and a pressure of 20. Again, I have no rate in this one. And then this is the way the tool works. I'm going to hover over it so about a quarter of my tool is covering that sleeve. I'm going to click and drag straight up, and it pushes this all to the left. If you hit Command Z and undo that, and you click at the top and you drag straight down, it actually pushes things to the right. Command Z to undo that. If you click and you drag right to left, it pulls things down. Command Z to undo that. If you click and go left to right, it pushes things up. So this tool will push everything in a direction. It just depends on how you drag it. So I'm going to hit restore all on that. So the way most people would try to thin down this sleeve, if that's what they were going for, is they would start at the elbow and they would click and they would push up. Now, when you first start using your tool, your impulse is to then just start to drag right back down again, thinking that the tool is actually going to continue to push it to the left. That'll not happen. It'll actually then just continue to go in and out and in and out. So you don't want that to happen. Let go of your mouse or take your stylus off your pad, come back to the elbow again, and click and drag in again, come back down, click and drag in again. And this does a smoother, easier job of using the push forward tool, because with the push forward tool, if you restore all and grab your push forward tool right now, come over to this image, make the tool a little bit larger, and you start to push in, you can see it starts getting tricky that you don't make this thing lumpy. So the advantage of the push forward, the push to the left tool is that it does full strokes and it will keep a smooth edge smooth. Now that doesn't mean that you can't use the smooth tool to smooth out the work that we're doing with the forward warp tool, but anyway. There you go. So I'm going to restore all again. The next thing we're going to do really quickly is we are going to change the shape of the sleeve. So I'm going to go on the other side. Now, this is not how I would really well, here, let me see. How do I really want to do this? Okay. Let's do this. Let's come back down to that leg again. I'm going to do her left leg, our left leg on this image. So the next tool down is the freeze tool. Now we've looked at this already as a paint tool, but now you actually need to see what you actually do, what a freeze will actually do. So if you click on the freeze tool, again, it has its own set of options. I'm going to make mine smaller. I'm also going to take the density. I like to keep mine pretty sharp. This is working pretty much like I use this clone stamp tool in terms of its control. I want it pretty sharp, so I'm going to give it a hardness of 80, and then I'm going to come over, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line down on this part of her hip, and it's going to be where I want to push the fabric into. So just take a look at my screen. You'll see what I mean. I'm going to click and just drag it a line down here like this. And what I'm looking for is I want to push this fabric. I want to push this fabric into this point, but I don't want to go in any further. This is going to be my limit. So up at the very top, grab the forward warp tool and then come back down here and just click and drag in. And you'll see as you start to knock in, you can actually make this a completely solid line. You can bring it all the way in and it will just follow this edge. Now in my case, when I crossed this, I actually went across my frieze. Once you cross your frieze, you get to an area here between her legs that is no longer frozen, and so you'll start to bring that in again. So this would just, if you don't want that to happen, you would just have to paint a much larger area for it to be frozen. Does that make sense to everyone? Are we good on this part? So this is a great way for you guys if you're ever trying to resolve, if you're trying to get away like flyaway hairs, you can freeze the part of the head that you want to bring the flyaways into and then just drag them into this point right here. Works great. It's much easier than retouching flyaways any other way. The next tool down is the thaw tool. So if you click on it and come over to your image, and make your brush much smaller. If you click on this, this removes the freeze part. So, however, when you remove the freeze part, it does not undo the transforming that you did around this image. So you can see I've got a relatively jagged edge going on mine right now. I think it's because of the pixelation. This image is so small, this is pixelating. So I could try the smooth tool on this and see if it did any help at all, but it's basically just trying to restore my image. But it gets it back somewhat here, so that would be where that was at. I'm going to click on Restore All. There's strategies for actually using this tool. So if you click all the way back out, let's say that you only want to change this girl's face. That's the only thing that you want to change. So it would mean that typically that you would grab the freeze tool and make it a much larger freeze tool, whatever, and you would have to start painting all over the whole image, including all of this, and you would paint everything except for her face. That seems like a lot of work to me. So instead, what you do, the trick to this is, go ahead and click on None to get rid of all of that. So click on the None under the mask options. Instead, in your mask options, you can click on Mask All, and what it'll do is it will put a mask over your entire image, and then you use the Thaw tool underneath it to simply open up her face. It's just a much faster way to get to this point right here. And then finally underneath this, there is the face awareness tool that we're going to work with on another image. And then there is also the hand tool, which works just like it does in Photoshop. If you hold down the space bar, you get the hand, you can move it around. And then the magnifying glass, which also works the same way in Photoshop. If you simply hold down space and command, you get the positive magnifying glass. If you add the option key to it, you get the negative magnifying glass. So that's basically the tool structure in a nutshell. Again, we've done everything on here, looked at everything on here, except for the face aware liquify, which we're going to do on a different image. So I'm going to hit Restore All in this right now. I'm going to hit None up at the very top. I don't have anything that I've actually done in here to be liquefied here, so I'm not going to worry about that part. So this is how I would go about trying to deal with the shoulders. And so again, I'm going to try to keep this to where everybody's sort of comfortable doing this work. So for me, I actually start with the freeze tool a lot. So I don't want anything on this girl's face to be changed, and I don't want most of her body to be changed either. So I'm actually just going to work my way down here. Now I'm not going to go down too much further because I don't really worry about her arms her legs here when I'm doing really close work up here at the top. I'm not going to change though, I'm not going to freeze her arms here. I'm not going to do any of that part because I think I need to bring whatever retouching I do into this area in a smoother way. So when I do this though, I hate working with the mask showing. I mean, this red is really distracting to me. So I turn it off. Again, if you go over to your properties panel where it says show mask and you uncheck this, it goes away, but things are still frozen. So again, if you click on the forward warp tool and drag this through, you'll see that it didn't do anything on her body here because that was all frozen. It only hit her arm down here at the end. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. Then how do you use these tools? So this is the best advice that I can give you. You want to use the biggest brushes that you can use, and you want to do the smallest movements and as many movements as you can possibly do. So this is why you you would really like to use a tablet for this. So I'm going to go to my tablet. And then I'm going to try to bring this left shoulder in. I'm just going to try to smooth this around so it looks more like a shoulder. But you have to ask yourself, okay, looking at this, where would her shoulder really be? And it's going to be in this area right in here. So there's quite a bit I need to push into this part right in here. Now, some people would freeze this area. I'm going to try to freestyle this one, and hopefully I'm not going to have to freeze it, but I might. So we'll just see how this whole thing goes. So I've got the forward warp tool selected. I'm going to make it larger. So if you want the same scaling as mine, I'm going to do something around 200. I am going to pump the density. I'm going to leave the density at 50. Again, what that means is that when I use just the edge of the brush, I'm not going to get a whole lot of action. But as I start to push this brush in more to the center, I'm going to get greater action on this. I'm going to leave my pressure at 50, and then this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit more. So again, it's small little taps. So I'm going to just start up here, and I'm just going to do small little taps. So I'm tapping this whole time, and I'm just going to continue to work my way around this. Again, I'm tap 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 tap, and I'm trying to imagine where her shoulder really is in all of this, and I'm going to continue to work my way in here and continue to sort of bring this part in. I'm going to turn my mask back on to make sure I'm not freezing too much over here. This is right on the line where this is. If I felt like I was distorting something where this is actually where those ruffles are sort of coming in, I might have to thaw this out so that I don't get something that looks like it's been crushed or compressed. But right now, I think I'm doing okay. So I'm going to continue to work on this. Again, tap, 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 tap. Now at this stage of the game, I'm moving a lot in here. I'm going to come in here to the middle to actually get that to look a little bit better. I might now actually have to go to something that's a little bit smaller to push more of the outside in. You can also try to bump your density up a little bit more. That will mean that the edge of your brush is a little more active. So I'm going to bring my density up to like an 80. And then you'll see that now you'll get a little bit more action that's closer to the edge of your brush and a little less action that's really more in on her body. So again, small taps, small taps, small taps, small taps to actually bring this part in. I'm going to also got to bring this slightly down because this whole thing is sweeping up. If you imagine her shoulder line, it would not be anywhere near this tall. So I'm going to start to work my way straight down, but you can also see what's happening now. I'm pulling the entire line down, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to go to my reconstruct tool, the next tool that's underneath this. I'm going to drop my pressure and my rate way down. I want this to happen really slowly because I don't want to completely redo all of this work in here. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller, and then I'm going to just start to run it along this edge right in here to sort of bring this whole part back. And it doesn't look like it's actually pushed down as much as I thought it had, so we're going to go back to the forward warp tool. Again, it still has its same settings here, and I'm going to continue to push down. But now again, the problem I'm running into is that it's pushing everything down. I'm just trying to get this little outer edge to go down. So I'm going to crank my density all the way up and then just start to bring it down from the very edge of my brush to just sort of like bring this part down. I'm going to make my brush really small right now, and even though it's not needed here, it's probably not her real body line. I'm going to lift this small valley up just a little bit. I think it'll actually help me out here. So I'm just going to drag this part up a little bit. And then again, I feel like the sleeve now is actually working pretty well for me. I'm going to zip back out and sort of see what this looks like. I'm going to use my preview check mark to go back and forth, and you can see, is this giving me the right line on here? I feel like the line on here is actually pretty good. I can see that as being her shoulder line. It may all need to be pushed in a little bit more, but that would mean that the fabric of the sleeve needs to be pushed in anymore, so it wouldn't be quite as billowy here. So if I want to bring the sleeve in a little bit more, I'm going to go to my push to the left tool. So again, the way this tool works is that if you click and drag up, it pushes to the left. That would make the sleeve bigger. Instead, I'm going to start at the top, click and drag down, and it will make it a little bit thinner. And then I'm going to do it again to actually bring it down a little bit more. And this would be how I would normalize that shoulder. And it actually looks fairly good. Questions about any of this? Is this working for you guys? So at this stage of the game, you can go ahead and say okay to this. The advantage of this is that not only is this a smart object now, but this is a smart filter. And so this Liquify is on there as a smart filter. If you click on the mask for your smart filter and invert it, Command I, it temporarily hides what you just did. So again, Command I will bring it back, but most importantly is this thing, if you save it, is sticky. It will go with you. So if this goes with you, then what happens is if you double click on this, Liquify, and go back in, we can pick right up where we left off. All of this is still undoable. So if you zip into here to take a look, the way you need to think about the Liquify tool is this. The last thing that I'm going to show you that is not here, that we haven't looked at yet, is in your properties panel. You want to come down. It's sort of in this view options. There's a thing that says show mesh. If you click on that, what you'll actually see is it puts like this screen on top of this girl. You can control the mesh. You can actually make it a finer mesh. It's just a preview. So you can do a larger one, a medium one, which is fine for this image, or a smaller one, which gives you a more... Do the small one because it makes it a little bit easier to see what's going on here. So this is how the Liquify tool works. So imagine this. If you took a window screen and you took an image and you glued them together and then you distorted the screen, you would distort the image. And that's what's happening here. Photoshop has no idea about this image. It doesn't understand that there's a girl attached to this. It doesn't understand any of that. All it knows is that you are distorting this mesh. So if you take a look at the mesh, you can actually see right here, it is being distorted. This whole area is being distorted. This is how the Liquify tool is actually working. This image is attached to the mesh, but the mesh is what we're now distorting. So mathematically, that's how Photoshop is doing this. It's not actually moving the pixels, it's actually moving the mesh. Does that make sense? And the advantage of that is that this mesh is remembered when you actually close this up, because it is a smart object. You can save this file, and 10 years from now, if you open this up, this mesh will still be here, and you can change it. So to see what that does, if you go to your Reconstruct tool with the mesh showing, so click on your Reconstruct tool, you can then come over here, like in this area right here where you see a real distortion in the screen, in the mesh, you can click on this and see, I told you I get this behavior too. So again, my graphics card is actually turned on. But anyway, that's what's actually happening in here. And so this isn't going to work. So I'm going to cancel out of this because it's already been saved. I already had gone out. It's still on my Liquify. I'm going to then turn my, so what you didn't see on the video, you're going to see right now. So when that happens to you and you get that pixelated break it all apart thing, you come to your settings menu down to performance, and you uncheck this use graphics processor and say okay. And now when I double click on Liquify to go back in, it's going to give me that warning telling me that, well, you have it turned off. But now when I use my Reconstruct tool, you can actually see, I'm going to make it bigger here. You'll see what's happening. It changes the mesh. It's reconstructing the mesh. And that's what then ultimately reconstructs the image. So if you continue this all the way back, this is eventually will bring it all the way back to the original undistorted mesh, and that is how you would remove. That's how this tool is working. Yes?
How did you get the mesh?
You just come over here to your properties and click on Show Mesh. So the advantage of this is that there are times when you're going to come into doing this Liquify work and something is going to look wrong and you maybe don't know what it is. If you look at the mesh, you will see you don't want radical distortions in the mesh that are sitting right next to areas that are not distorted at all. You want distortion to slowly work its way into the area you're trying to fix and then also slowly work its way back out again. Does that make sense to everyone?
When you say show mesh,
Yes.
is it under load mesh?
No. It's under View Options, Show Mesh. Got it? So the Load Mesh and Save Mesh, I can show you what this is. Smart Objects has pretty much made this no longer necessary. But the way it used to work is this. So I'm going to cancel out of this just to reset mine. I'm going to double click on the Liquify again to go back into Liquify. If you guys never came out, then you're fine. You can do the same thing. If you click on If you click on up here at the top on the mesh options, if you click on save mesh, this is how you used to have to save this. Again, this used to not work on smart objects, so that made everything that we were doing destructive and you couldn't edit it. But you could save the mesh and then you could reload the mesh that you saved, which was sort of the workaround. So to do that, you would come over here to save mesh and you would click on this. And when you do anything like this, you would then name this after the exact name of the file that this is supposed to go with, because a mesh that doesn't match the file is worthless to you. So to then name this mesh, you can see the extension on it is MSH. If you find that liquefy file, I'm actually going to find the version of it. So I'm going to click where I'm going to look for it. I'm going to find that folder. So hang on one second. I'm just going to show you a quick naming trick. So I'm going to find the folder, the retouching folder, session 8, the new retouching files. If you then click on the name of the image that made it, click on this, it will populate that. You'll see that it puts a JPEG extension on this. You would change that JPEG extension back to MSH. And then say, okay, you would want to keep your mesh right alongside the image that created it. So then if we go back into, if I get rid of this mesh, or I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this. If I'm going to throw away the entire liquefy smart filter right now, so I'm just going to toss it into the trash. I've no longer liquefied this thing. If I then go back into the filter, down to liquefy, and say okay, you'll see that I've got just the plain mesh right here. There is no undo, but I can load the mesh and click on this to say load. And then again, I would go to this file, which is the mesh itself, click on it and load it again. And then I will have the distortion part the way I wanted it. Again, I've got my background is showing, so let me get rid of this. I'll just go back. Does that make sense, everybody? So in the original assignment, it said to actually save the mesh because that's how we used to work here. We don't do that anymore. So, but you should know what this is all about. You can also, if you have a selection made in Photoshop and you save it as a layer mask, you can actually load those masks right here. So if you had the perfect mask for the figure, you could load it here if there was a reason for you to use that. That's basically everything that's going on in here. Questions about any of this? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK with that. We're going to close this up and we're going to take a quick 10-minute break. So it is 5 after 4. If you could be back at quarter after a hard 10. We'll finish up the liquefy work and you guys will be off to the races. So just quick question. Is everybody sort of okay with modifying clothes? Yeah? Are we good on this part? I'm moving in the right direction here? Okay, good. I'm going to start this recording again. Okay, so we are done. God, hello. We're done with this image. We're done with this image. I want to do one other really quickly, actually maybe a couple of these other really quickly, and then we'll talk about, again, I haven't had a chance to rewrite the assignment, so I'm just going to show it to you, and we'll talk about that part. So, but the next one I want to go after is the orange JPEG. So if you click on that guy and open that up into Photoshop. See, but didn't I tell you I'd be honest with you and tell you anything?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
I feel like I just want to ask so many more questions.
I know, we're gonna
Yeah,
come back.
one of these days we just won't learn.
I think I've made a serious mistake of this. This could be so Versa. What was your biggest mistake teaching? Well, there was this class and I promised them that I would just be completely frank and honest and open with them about anything. They could ask me anything, and boy, that went south.
And the second story looks like it's cooking.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, you don't need to save what's her name unless whatever, you can work on it. All right, so anyway, I'm going to go back, open the oranges. So I want you to realize that liquefy is not all about just people and that kind of stuff. So anyway, I want to try to do some quick work on this guy. So I'm going to hide everybody else. I'm going to do the same trick. Clearly, when I was looking, trying to harvest images here, I ran into some places that's got really a whole lot of really small images. So the first thing I'm going to do on this one, did everybody get this thing open? Yeah, okay, so I'm going to do, again, I'm going to double its size. So up to the image menu, down to image size, And then again, because it's just going to be easier to double the width now because I can. It's an even number that I can multiply by 2. So put in 1600 for the width, and it'll double it. That did not look like that doubled it though. Oh, actually it did. And then double click on the hand to kick it all the way back open. All right, so what I want to do is I want to reshape the orange that's right here, the one that doesn't look like an orange anymore, that sort of looks, I don't know, it doesn't look like an orange to me anymore. So that's what I'm going to do here. But again, what I'm ultimately going to try to do here is create a new background for me to do this part on, or we'll see how this goes. I may not need the new background, so I might just be able to resize the orange. So we'll go after that one first. Again, just out of habit, whether I need it or not, I'm going to make a new copy of the background, Command J to do that. And then I'm going to select this orange. I'm going to see how good the quick selection tool will do it. So, or let's try the object selection tool. We haven't talked about that guy as much anymore. So if you use the object selection tool, you can actually come over and do an outline around this image. It can be pretty loose here, and we'll see if it actually can pick it up. In your case, if you do object selection, it may just show up. Yeah, mine's not showing up, but that also might be because I don't have something set. It's this overlay. Is your overlay showing?
I think it's because at the top of your lasso and that rectangle.
Yeah, we're on
We're on
Oh, so if you did rectangle, it showed up?
Yeah.
Okay.
What does it mean when it's doing this?
They cut it to
Or
this.
like, you can do that. Why is it just like
Oh, yeah, no, that's exactly what you're looking for. That's what you want. And that's, mine is old, but that's the behavior that you actually want, because it means it's treating everything here as its own object, right? So then just make sure you hover over this guy and use him. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing this one, though, so I'm just going to go back again and do a quick selection around. Yeah, and I'm going to jump this to its own layer, Command J. And so if I turn this off just to take a quick peek at the condition of this, you can see that it left part of this off right here, so I'm not really happy with that. So I'm not going to use that. I'm going to actually do the quick select and mask and just see if I can get a better selection going on in here. So I'm going to turn off my bottom layer. I've got this top layer going up to the select menu, down to select and mask. I'm going to use the quick selection tool, the one that's at the very top, to just go on the inside of this. And then I'm going to use the refine edge tool and just click around this to see if it'll help. No, that actually did worse. Back up to the quick selection tool and see, make it smaller, see if I can't just hit this one little edge. That one's pretty good. That one's pretty good. This one will be pretty good. And this will hopefully be pretty good. Okay, feel good about that. Again, I'm going to go back as a selection. Say OK. And then jump this to its own layer, Command J. And take a peek at that. Yeah, it feels better. Okay, so again, I'm going to do the same trick before. I'm going to leave that background turned on. I'm going to leave my bottom background. And I'm not going to rebuild this because I really just want to distort that one area. So again, you're going to change this now into a smart object. So up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, convert to smart object. And then we'll bring it into liquify. So up to the filter menu, down to, so you'll see this really quickly, guys. Look at it on the screen. You'll see that there's a liquify sitting up at the very top. It'll always store your most recent filters up here, but you don't want to pick these. The reason, so this will do it, But what it'll do is it will use the settings that you used the last time you used the filter. This will not bring you into the liquefy space. It will simply run those changes on this image. Same with dust and scratches. It will just run it on this image. So you don't want to do that. You want to actually use the liquefy space. So click on the liquefy tool and you'll actually go into it. And I'm going to leave my support off. And again, in my drop-down menu right now, if I turn off show backdrop, you'll just see the image itself. I've also got my grid, my mesh is on here showing, so I'm going to turn my mesh off so that I don't see that part. I'm going to click on backdrop to turn it on and then just see what happens when I put this onto the background layer itself. It's going to be really hard for me to tell where this is, but we'll sort of see what happens here. Because again, this is the layer that I brought in. So I'm going to zoom into this guy. I am going to grab the push to the forward warp tool, so the one that's at the very top, make it really large. And then again, I'm going to drop my density down to about 50%. And then I'm just going to start to try to work my way out here. And you can see the minute I'm trying to grab this part right here, I'm trying to pull this whole thing out. It's actually distorting this part, but what you're forgetting is that this the background is not really going to be affected by this because I've isolated this. So if I try to use this thing on the background, nothing's happening here. So just remember that and just realize that you can grab over on the image. Well, here, I'm going to show you a better way of doing this, or another way to see it. With the background not on, you can realize, oh, I can grab this thing and pull out from here as opposed to being on the inside and trying to push out from this side. So I'm going to restore all, and then I'm simply going to grab this center part right here, and I'm going to try to pull this out to give it more shape. But I'm also going to try to not distort the sections of the orange. So I'm going to click on those and literally pull out on the sides of those and in that same direction so that they don't like get all twisted up and weird looking. And then I can come into the end and pull this guy out and continue to work my way out. And that feels better to me right now. Again, you can use your preview to see what you actually did on that. It's distorting a little bit of the orange stuff in the middle, but I don't know that you really notice that. Does it look that much different than the striations that are happening in the rest of the orange? It looks pretty similar to me, so I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. And then simply double click the hand and you realize that, oh yeah, I can use this for other things here. So I would probably go back in and refine this because I feel like that this area is not showing up. It needs to be a little bit more rounded here as it does down here as well. So, but you guys get where I'm going with all of this, correct? All right, so if that, you can close this one up. There's one last file I want to open up just to show you one last part of Liquify that we have not gone over. And this is back into the original set of files. It's going to be in, yeah, this is in your normal folder. So it's not in the new files. It's this one that says Twin Sisters at the bottom. If you can actually select that guy and bring that up into Photoshop. So again, I'm just going to demonstrate some stuff to you. There's nothing I find especially needing retouching in this part, whatever. I mean, this isn't like high fashion beauty, that kind of stuff. It's two twin sisters, right? So, but at any rate, just to demonstrate where this stuff is, it helps to have two faces in here. So again, I'm going to make a copy of this layer, Command J. I'm going to convert that to a smart object, up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, and convert to smart object. And then finally, I'm going to go into Liquify again and say OK. So in Liquify again, there is a feature called Face Aware Liquify. It's all on the right-hand side in the Properties panel. This is where everything gets adjusted. If you open it up, it's a drop-down menu, and you open it up, you can actually see in here that hopefully it requires hardware acceleration. So because I've turned my graphics card off, this is not going to work. So going to be the same for you. No, but again, not everything causes that to happen, right? So let's just try it. You guys can stay in there. I'm going to cancel out of this, go up to my Photoshop menu, to settings, down to performance, and turn my graphics card processor back on again and say okay, and then go into Liquify again, and hopefully this will not be an issue. So in Liquify again, and you can see it's no longer an issue. So in the Liquify, you've now got a drop-down menu. You will see that Photoshop is smart enough to recognize that there are two faces here. If you only had one in here, again, you wouldn't have to select this, but you can see now that you've got a face 1 and a face 2. If you hover over this, even if you can't tell which one is which one, the minute you make a change to one of these, you'll actually see that happen. I'm gonna go back to my face number 1. I think it works from right to left, from left to right, but we'll see right now. So once you're in here, you can control all of these things using sliders. You can also do it manually using your pen control over the top. I don't use those. I actually just use the sliders here. I think they're easier to work with. So for instance, if I come to the eye size on this first one down and I click and I push all the way to the right side, you can see that on girl number 1, her right eye just got made larger. Now, her left eye got made larger. Her right eye didn't move at all, and that is because I didn't have this chain link between the two. If you click on the chain link between the two, that means you only need to move one slider and they both move the same amount. However, if you do a whole lot of beauty retouching, you find that there are people who actually most people have different size eyes. And so this is a way to balance those out. So you could say to yourself, again, I'm never going to lose sight of doing these assignments, working with this tool, and not lose sight of the ethical, moral discussion that we've had. But I did Christy Turlington for a contact lens company, and one of her eyes is literally, it's like 30% smaller than her other eye. And for contact lenses, it was just pictures of her eye. And so we had to balance the eyes out. It looked bizarre. But at any rate, we both got paid a lot of money for it. So she was happy, so was I. So at any rate, that is eye size. Again, if you then double click on the little guy, actually it's not resetting, but you can drag this back down to a 0. You can also make eyes smaller by going in a negative direction. That makes them smaller. Again, I'm going to 0 this back out. Then eye height, I'm going to undo I'm not going to do the chain link between any of these. I'm going to do one just so you can see the difference in the other. But if you do the eye height, it's actually opening her eye up, or you can close her eye down. If you go to then eye width, you can actually get it to be wider or more narrow. If you do tilt, it's actually going to rotate it. If you then go to distance, it'll actually pull them further apart or bring them closer together. So again, all of this is going to work on face 2 as well. If you want to actually click on reset up at the very top, this will only reset face number 1. If we go to face number 2 and try some other stuff out, we can actually do nose height. If you click on it, it lifts the nose. It creates more space between the lips and the tip of her nose. It doesn't like lift it up further on her forehead. Nose width will actually make it wider or more narrow. If we come down to mouth, I don't think this one works all that great, but you can see it'll do a little bit. Let's go back to face number 1 because she's got her lips closed and it'll be easier to see. So on face number 1, I'm going to actually do smile, and you can actually increase her smile so she looks like the Joker. I mean, again, this works with really, really small adjustments on this. If you crank it to its extreme, it just looks like a freak show. But you can also get her to frown. You can actually drop it down a little bit more. So, and in this case, I think it works pretty good in terms of just trying to bring off a little of the happiness part. If you do your preview on and off, you can sort of see what's going on in there. In terms of the lip lid, so this is actually how you can change, again, how plump her lips are. So if you drag it all the way to let's do the upper lip first. The upper lip, if you actually drag all the way to the right, it narrows the space between her nose and her upper lip. If you go in the opposite direction, it thins it out. And then the lower lip does the same thing. Again, it'll make it thinner out. I think this is done in the wrong direction because these are now opposite of one another, and I think that sends a mixed message. So if you want her mouth to actually just be bigger overall, the lower lip you go all the way to the left, the upper lip you go all the way to the right, and now she's got a bigger mouth. Mouth width, pretty obvious, make it wider or more narrow. And then mouth height, it'll actually then, again, give her more. So now it's actually really doing that whole pucker thing here and pretty serious distortion in here. Part of this is actually coming from the fact that we've got such a negative smile on her. So if we zero this part back out, it won't be quite as distorted, but that's still pretty distorted looking. So anyway, her forehead, you can actually lift it up, again, because she's got bangs, it can't really tell. You can see what's actually happening, though. You can raise the forehead up, or you can bring it down. You can actually lift her chin up or down, but this lifts the whole jawline, actually, in spite of the fact that it says jawline right underneath it. In jawline, it makes it more narrow or wider, but I would also call the bottom up part jawline here, chin height. But you can sort of see what's going on here in that. I'm going to reset all of this because this has become way too freaky. And we'll continue with just the rest of her mouth, her forehead line, jawline, and then the face width. You can increase the entire width of it or narrow it down. So how often do I use these tools? Not very often. If you do use them, you want to be, Aaron's over there just cracking himself up. Yeah. If there was a way I could quickly share my screen with you, I would, and get you to put this up on the screen here, but there isn't. So anyway, nonetheless. But very, very, very small adjustments in here can do wonders for this. So I don't know if you know this, but this is true of pretty much all Hollywood movie posters. All of Hollywood movie posters, I mean, going back like forever when they actually had to do this, when they didn't have Photoshop to do this, all the eyes in Hollywood posters, whatever, all the eyes are made 10 to 15% larger than they are in real life. It's like a standard rule. Now, if you go to Japan, they make that they make them 1,000% bigger because it's just, that's anime. What can you say? But at any rate, just so that you know. Are there any questions about this part? Okay, we can cancel out of this. We are going to start your homework because I want to make sure that everyone understands what I'm looking for in their homework. And so the last thing that I want to do, so this will be in the new file. Again, I will send out an announcement with what I'm asking you guys to do, but I take that back. Let's do one other really quick. Before we get to the homework, there's one more in the new Liquify files called Big Hair. If you can open that one up. And again, right off the bat, I'm going to double the size. I feel like I got caught in some images from the 80s kind of like thing, right? Giant shoulder pads, really big hair. It's just like, okay, I lived through all of this. Anyway, I'm going to make the file bigger. So image menu, image size. Again, if you guys are working with normal images, you do not need to do this step. This has got nothing to do with liquefying. I'm just trying to get something big enough that it gives me a little bit of room to work with. And the images that I've found here are so incredibly tiny. So I'm going to do the height adjustment because it's easier for me to do the math. So it'll be 1860 in pixels. And say OK. And double click on the hand to get it to be full. Command J to actually duplicate this. So I'm not going to worry too much about, because this background has already got some modeling in it. It's already got some sort of like waviness in it. I'm not going to worry about creating a new background the way I actually did with the figure of the shoulder pads. You could do that, and if I had more time, I probably would. It's kind of my standard go-to. If you can really separate the figure from the background, then you only are modifying the figure and you're not modifying the background. And so I may regret not doing this, but we'll see how it goes. I'm going to regret doing this. Let's just try this really quickly. Do a select subject on this. So if you guys should have something up at the top that says select subject, I'm going to go to my select and mask workspace really quickly because I get better controls here than I get in the regular version of Photoshop. On my drop-down menu, I can just check to make sure I'm doing this on the cloud or in the cloud. I'm going to do a select subject. And I don't see anything selected. Hang on one second. Let me cancel all of this. I got to turn off the one on the bottom. So then go back into the one on the bottom was the same, so I couldn't see what was selected. So back into select and mask workspace and select subject and refine hair. And I'm just going to accept this. I'm going to use it as a selection in my output. Say OK. Command J to jump this to its own layer. Turn this off. Command click on it, even though it's turned off, to load that as a selection. Go up to the select menu, come down to modify and expand this. I'll see if 20 pixels doesn't work. In this case, it does. It does a pretty good job. If that doesn't work, if it wasn't enough, you just hit Command Z to undo it and then go right back into modify again and just create a higher number. So, but in this case, the 20 pixels was fine on that. And then we're going to see how freaky not content aware film. We're going to try again AI again on this guy. So up to the window menu, down to contextual taskbar, and click on generate. And this time I'm just going to do remove subject. Say what?
You did a great job this time.
Did you didn't have to do anything? Yeah. This one actually may screw mine up, but actually no, it didn't do too bad. You do have, once you do this, you've got 3 variations that sit up on the top. If you click on the, you can walk your way through them. I'm sort of liking this last one, I think, the best, so that's the one I'm going to keep. You'll notice that there's little garbage cans at the bottom of the other variations. You can get rid of variations on that way. You can actually then click on, in my case, on the 3 dots that are at the top. Yours is going to be better. This is how I could rate them, which skews how the next generation would go. In your case, you probably have upscaling on this other side, which will allow you to res this stuff up if it's big enough to begin with. And then you can also regenerate from here. But I'm going to say, okay, this looks fine. I'm going to accept that. And so in my case right now, I want this to be all one single layer. And right now it's not. It's actually on its own layer. So I'm going to get rid of my bar. I'm going to Command J to make a new copy of my my background layer. I just need to put my figure that I've knocked out up above the generated fill layer. So I'm going to click on that, drag it up to the top. When you see the little blue line at the top, you know you're above, so you can let go. And then finally, I'm going to click on my generative fill layer and Command E to merge that down into my background. So I've got a solid background to work on. And then click on the figure to actually turn it back on, select it, and then turn it into a smart object. So up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, and convert to smart object. So then we can liquefy this, and I just want to make her hair less 80s. So up to the filter menu, down to liquefy. So my first move in here, and again, if you want to see this in space, fine. We don't need to really see it in space, but my first thing is that I don't want to distort this face. So I'm going to go to my freeze tool, and I'm going to click on her face, and you'll see you'll get, if you don't have the show mask on, you'll get this warning saying it's not on. So I'll say okay, and then I'll come over here and I will collapse my face aware liquefy and turn on the show mask, and then simply go back again to this and go ahead and paint it in. I also don't want to distort anything around here like that. Now I also don't want to distort her hands, so I'm also going to paint across those as well into her arm. And that looks actually pretty good to me. I am going to turn on my background so that I can actually see something. So click on Show Backdrop. Turn on, instead of all layers, I'm just going to do layer number 1, because that will actually then, I think, show me the blank background. I'm pretty sure that's the blank background. If I move it and I start to see it, I'll know that's the wrong one. I don't want to look at this red thing while I'm actually doing this work, so I'm going to uncheck Show Mask. I am going to then pick the Push Forward tool, the very top one on the left-hand side. I'm going to make it much larger. I'm going to density 40 is fine, rate 50 is fine, size on this 800 is a little big. So I'm going to come back down, and then I'm simply going to start to work my way in here. Again, with the density as low as it is, you can see it's pushing the outer hair in more. It's not really shoving everybody in. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. I'm going to push my density up. The reason that's happening is because my brush is too soft. and I'm going to do the same move again. And now you can see, you can start further in here, and you can actually shape this part in a little bit more. And so then I'm just going to try to do something that looks natural. Again, lots of small little steps to actually work this down. You can bring the other side in. The other side's actually almost more offensive than the first one. If you're worried about distorting her shoulder right now, this would be a good time to freeze her shoulder. So turn on the show mask again, grab the freeze tool at this stage of the game, and freeze that shoulder. You got to freeze the hair that's in there as well. Otherwise, it's just going to look, it'll look obvious as to what you're doing. So uncheck my show mask again, go back to my push forward warp tool, and work my way in. I don't need to worry about crossing this brush across her face because it's already frozen. Really bring down the, not so much. And then continue to work my way into here a little bit more. So there's only so far you can go. If you try to go too far with the hair that's at the very bottom by her wrists, you'll see that that hair is stuck to her wrists. So if we, because it's frozen. So if we move into here, you can only do so much of it. You can see this area right here. This is a dead giveaway that we are liquefying this part right here. So I'm going to grab the reconstruct tool and fix this part right here, so that that's not actually distorted the way it looks, pulled and torn in like that. I'm going to kick back out, and this is now my before and after.
When I try to do it, it says the backdrop settings are preventing the 3D from showing image changes.
Then turn your backdrop settings off.
But then she goes away.
We're 3 minutes away from being done, so hold that thought and I'll be over there and check that out. So really quickly, so anyway, I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this. And you can see it's a massive difference here. I mean, what we've actually done. You know, and it changes this. I mean, this is now, it's not the 80s, this is now the 90s. Questions about any of this? We good? All right, so this then is the last thing I'm going to show you that I want you to do. And again, hopefully everybody's going to be cool with this. If you're not, just tell me you're not cool with doing this, and and you'll be fine. This last image, this is the one that you're going to actually retouch. So this is Comme des Garçons, done by Paolo Reversi. And this is actually, Ray became really famous for doing this kind of like really seriously body modifying dresses. So what I'm going to ask you to do in this is to make this look more normal. So get rid of the extended booty, get rid of the hunchback, but also make sure that you don't screw up the background. And so it should look clean. Does that make sense to everybody, what's going on here? So does everybody have a good idea of maybe how they want to attack this? Good. Okay, that's it.